David, what are you doing to prepare for your garden?
So right now I've got my seedlings behind me. So most of the seedlings, I haven't planted the tomatoes yet. So I have 3 square foot garden beds, and those beds, one of them is going to have the tomatoes, nightshade family plants like peppers, and then one is going to be mostly leafy greens with some herbs and other uh, companion plants, like say marigolds and some wildflowers, bring some pollinators in. And then the third bed is going to be mostly herbs and a lot of fennel and dill. I love those two, and lots of herbs in probably all the gardens, all the beds. So um, yeah, these are my seedlings that I started a couple months ago, actually.
Oh, look at that.
So we got some lemon balm, some sage. Onions are good as I don't know if you can see that. Okay.
Yes, I can
All
see
right.
that.
So onions are really good for bulbing up. Um, for Actually, they don't bulb up very well here in South Florida, but they're really good for companion planting. Kohlrabi last season was the first time I grew kohlrabi, and it grew pretty well. Um, so then I got Swiss chard over here, a number of things. I'm excited to get the beds. So I'm going to start planting the first bed this coming weekend.
Wow. So tell us about your little setup there.
So these are just grow lights, very cheap grow lights that you can get on Amazon. Uh, and then this is a click and grow system that you can buy pods of like basil and other herbs to grow indoors, and they'll do pretty well. But then once that's done, then I actually fill the pods with mostly perlite and then a layer of vermiculite at the top, and use that as a seed starter for uh, for what I'm going to grow in the fall.
Okay, so you said that it was a click. Can you talk about that again? What is
Yeah,
that?
click and grow.
I'm
It's
not familiar with it. So tell me what click and grow is.
it's the brand name of this
Okay.
grow system. Yeah,
Now
yeah.
that's not hydroponic though, right? Because you said you had
Actually, this
vermiculite.
this is hydroponic,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's the only hydroponic thing I use.
Okay. So do you eventually you keep them indoors hydroponically all season long?
Yeah, but this time of year I use it to as I'm starting. It's a great way to as a plant starter to start seedlings, and unless you buy their pods, it's not really good long term. So unless you're really good with, if unless you're gonna, add the chemicals to the water and do the whole hydroponic thing, and my thing with hydroponics is it's not really organic, and I like to go organic whenever possible. So
Yeah, I agree with the hydroponic as far as your viewpoint goes. I'm not a fan. I think it's great, to do if that's what you have access to and that's what you can use. I think it's great, but I think given the choice, I would prefer not to use it. And I always wonder about all the chemicals, when you do it, especially if people do it on a big scale, where, what happens to all those chemicals in our environment. And so that's why I kind of feel the way you do as far as it I don't feel like it's organic because I feel like the chemicals are doing something to our environment. So, but it's just a fun thing to experiment with on a small scale, just to
right,
see what you can do.
right,
So now do you do the square foot gardening method?
yes. So I've got a few slides I want to share with on my other screen here.
Okay.
Uh, all right, hold on a second. So I grew up in Southern California, and I just loved gardening, growing up there. And then when I moved to Florida, I learned it, this we have a lot of challenges. The soil it's not really soil, it's dead dirt. Dirt is dead to me. And life, there's so much life in soil. So when this is the place that we moved to. This is where we live now. And when we moved here, it looked like this. It was
Oh
just
my.
a lot of dead dirt. This was the eyesore of the neighborhood. So here's what. Okay, here's a few more pictures of our house. What a mess it was. Okay,
And
that
you
was
and you
before
decided to move into this house being a gardener. You were
in
up
20,
for this
in 2011
challenge.
with all this dead dirt. You couldn't walk across what was supposed to be grass there without getting burrs in your socks.
Wow.
And this is where we live now. I mean, this is the same place, same yard. Of course, we put in a pool and put in some landscaping, but it took a truckload of compost to liven up the soil.
That's beautiful.
So we got some banana trees there, banana plants, excuse me. People call them trees. So this is the before and after.
That is
You can
amazing.
see what the difference microbes in the soil can do. Biology, the right biology, because healthy soil leads to healthy plants, leads to healthy people. And then I started Stack, Serve, and Harvest last year after I was furloughed. Um, and because I wanted to share uh, what I learned during my learning curve and help shorten that learning curve for other people and dealing with the challenges. Now, here's just a quick little thing about something I'm grafting. So you don't think of eggplant as being a rare fruit, right? But how
No.
about when it grows on an 8 or 9 foot tree? I have this grafted to a wild cousin called turkeyberry or Solanum torvum, and so this is about 8 feet tall. It's above the gutters on our house, and it's just starting to produce some eggplant. So
That's amazing.
so fruit trees. We've got a lot of fruit trees, and uh, I highly recommend. I'm just so amazed that people, if they have the land, and why are they putting a lot of ornamental trees when they could plant something that feeds them? These are our avocados that are producing for the first time this year. We're excited about that. And down here, we can grow tropical fruit like star fruit, also known as carambola. And this was taken just a couple of weeks ago. I looked out there today, and these are turning yellow and ripening.
Wow.
And black sapote. It's related to persimmon, and this is also fruiting for the first time for us this year. We're excited about that. Oh, it's also known as chocolate fruit, chocolate pudding tree, because well, you open it up and it's not ripe until it's mushy, and it's the substance and color of chocolate pudding, and it's not quite as sweet, but add some sugar to it and you're good to go.
Huh.
I know people who use that as their desserts.
Wow.
And our latest arrival here, this is black. This is butterscotch sapodilla, and I don't know if you've ever had sapodilla fruit.
No, I haven't.
It is delicious, and there's so many of these tropical fruits that most Americans have never heard of, and it's amazing, so amazing. This is an ice cream banana tree. I'm sorry, there I go again. Banana plant, and it's also called blue java. So square foot gardening. This is we got the second edition. There's also the third edition, which I haven't read, but the second edition is what someone handed me when I was struggling and trying to figure out gardening, and I was kind of, I don't know, it was just a struggle. So what I what I did, I read this book and I was like, I'm definitely gonna have to try this. And uh, I highly recommend it, especially if you live in South Florida. This is the way to go. So a big part of square foot gardening is planning what you're gonna do, and this is so I bought the very top box is my first box, and then the nightshade box number two, and then the third box on the bottom. I rotate this every season. There's a whole thing of crop rotation, and
So when you
there's
say rotate, you mean that you have three beds and you'll take basically the same plan but move it to a different bed.
yes,
Is
each
that right? Okay.
season. So I rotate where the tomatoes are going to go, and so next year it'll go in, like, say, bed number three instead of two,
Okay.
or you know, switch everything around. So that's a good practice for a number of reasons. And then like I mentioned earlier, companion plants. So certain herbs are really good companion plants with, like, say, tomatoes. And I mean, the cauliflower, they have things that they grow well with. Cabbage, I'm growing cabbage and mint in the same square, and because the mint will help deter the the pests for the cabbage.
Is that right? That's good to know. But now I think I heard that mint can really take over a garden. So is that's not a concern for you?
Not really, because by the end of the growing season, I dig everything out, pull everything out, and I solarize during the summer, and that's a whole nother thing. I have two of my beds still under plastic, solarizing to kill the soil parasites, root knot nematodes, which are a big problem down here. so, uh,
So
I
you were
have
talking
one
about the mint and the cauliflower, then I interrupted you.
mint and cabbage, actually. So
Cabbage.
yeah,
Okay.
I I really haven't had too much of a problem of the mint taking over. So there's that's not much of a problem for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see what else I have. Oh no, that's pretty much it for what I had to show.
Yeah, you've been really keeping busy and planning things out. And that you said tomatoes. Now, if people who are living in the northern areas, then tomatoes is an easy, fairly easy thing for them to grow. And I always find it frustrating that if I go into one of those big box stores in the garden centers, in if I'm in some place like Southwest Florida, they'll have the same tomato plants that they would sell in a northern place. And people struggle with growing most kinds of tomatoes here. So what do you say about that?
Okay. What's a big thing about that is you got to know what to plant and when to plant it. If you, I see people trying to grow tomatoes during the summer, and I did that. I've been there. That was one of the mistakes I made, and I finally realized it's too much work for what I'm getting out of it. So, uh, so know that during the cool months here, that is the perfect time to grow tomatoes. And also, if you're still having trouble with it, don't try to grow the big tomatoes. They have some challenges, and maybe you've got a problem with root knot nematodes. If your tomato plants are never doing well and they're always susceptible to disease and pests, well, when you finally pull up that plant and take a look at the roots, do they have knots on the roots? Those knots are those soil parasites getting into the roots and making your plant unproductive. and susceptible to pests and disease. It's always the weak plants that get the diseases and the pests. So you want to have strong, healthy soil too. A good soil by biodiversity. A healthy soil is not going to have as much of a problem with the soil parasites.
So how do you like to prepare your soil to be
So
healthy?
right. So when this coming weekend, I'll be adding a lot of compost. I'll be adding about 2 to 4 inches. Yeah, about 2 to 4 inches of compost and worm castings and azomite rock dust. It's a rock dust that's full of minerals, trace minerals.
How do you spell? Do you know how to spell that? Because I couldn't understand.
Yeah,
Rock.
azomite is Azamite.
Okay.
Azomite.
As a mic rock dust. Okay.
Yeah, and then early on in the growing season, because that takes a long time for the to break down and for the microbes to make it available to the plants. So another thing I do is there's a mineral spray that comes from the ocean called sea crop, and I buy that. For those that are down here in South Florida, Tree Amigos growers in Davie are great resource for this sort of thing. They have sea crop, and it's had most of the salt extracted from that. So there might be very trace amounts, and that's why you don't want to use too much of it. You got to follow the directions. So you mix it up, and I'll do one drench in the soil, and then I'll do two two foliar sprays. So I'm mixing it into one of those spray pump sprayer things and spray it on the leaves, the foliage of the plants. So I'll do that. Um, not all at once. I'll do two applications of that separated by maybe a month or so.
Okay. So sounds like you've kind of over the time you've accumulated some of this knowledge to know, and that and I mean I'm doing plant-based lifestyle, and I think you are too. And I always love how they parallel, because we talk about the gut microbiome and how what you eat feeds your gut microbiome, and then that determines how much immunity you have to diseases. And you're talking about feeding the soil, because
Mhm.
that's going to also create that microbiome for the plant.
For
Did
the
you want to?
soil.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That is the soil microbiome, and I'm glad you brought that up. And as far as plant-based lifestyle, I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I'm eating much less meat, and I really respect those who have gone vegan or vegetarian. Uh, I I so I think you can be much healthier by eating less meat or no meat. So
Right.
I love growing my own food too, and enriching my diet with that. This is some of my green smoothie,
Uh-huh. That you got
homegrown.
that from your garden too. When you were talking about rotating crops, I was thinking, because I have longevity spinach, and this is a popular plant for newbie gardeners, especially in South Florida, because it's basically you stick it in the ground and it grows, and as it gets longer, you can just cut off a piece and stick that in the ground and it'll grow. So I have this one garden bed, and it just became a whole bed of
Mhm.
longevity spinach. Now it's much more than I can eat. In the beginning, it was great, but now I'm like, oh my goodness, what
I
do I
know,
do with all this?
I
So
know.
if I was going to rotate crops, I would really have to work on that bed and get all that long. But it does
So,
flower, which was surprising to me. I didn't expect that. It was very beautiful.
well, crop rotation is when I say crop rotation, I'm referring to annuals.
Okay.
not the perennial. So that's a perennial that can stay where it's at. Although, I have longevity spinach growing in a number of places in my garden, and so I'll have it, and it'll be doing well in one spot, and then it'll die back, and something else will take over there, and then I'll have another spot where it wasn't growing well, and then it decides to take off. So that's why I like to grow it in different places in the garden, and then just see what happens. And then there's Okinawa spinach. Are you familiar with that?
I am, but I don't have any.
Okay, I should send you a cutting
Oh,
because Okinawa spinach is very closely related to longevity spinach, but it's got purple underneath the leaves, and I don't think it has the same health properties, but it is known to uh, it's known to cut your cholesterol. But I think
oh,
a lot of foods that we eat from the garden do that also.
yeah. Now that's also perennial.
Yes,
Okay,
it
great.
has a different growing habit though. It's a little more of a bush than than a how longevity spinach is kind of like a thick ground cover.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, that's speaking of sending me things. That's basically how we met. I was on Facebook and I really wanted to have a moringa tree, but I don't have a very large yard. And I saw David posting something about dwarf moringas. And I said, "Oh, I think I have to do this." So I got in touch with him and we arranged it that he could send me some little seeds from the pods. And because it's something that grows so easily, even though I'm be green with Amy, I'm not very green in the garden, but I do very well when it's something that just is perennial or something that's easy to grow. And so it really did very well. I started it off in a pot, and I didn't really know how tall it would get. And I'm wondering. I'm going to ask you a question from me. So I have this dwarf moringa that's taller than me now. And I didn't do very much to it. So it's just got a very long, high trunk. And then it's almost like a little palm tree the way it looks because everything is just kind of growing on top. And now, even though it's a dwarf moringa, it's too high up for me to reach those. So
Yeah,
can I like hack it and it'll grow and get bushier? I'm afraid to do
you
anything.
no, they do better with a lot more trimming. So I have one that I chopped it all the way down to the trunk, down to the as a stump. I mean, it was like a stump this high off the ground, and it grew back with a vengeance. But in such healthy, vibrant growth, it just sprang back to life, and it's just outside my window here. Uh, you can't see it with the camera, but and it's yeah, definitely recommend keeping moringa trimmed down to like 4 or 5 feet, and
Okay.
mine just keeps growing, towering over the house. I've got
Yeah.
about four of those three or four of those, yeah, four of them, and I'm gonna each year I'm gonna chop another one down to the ground and just see it come back. I I felt like I had enough moringa and I needed a little more space. But then when it came back, I was like, I'll just it wants to come back and I'll let it come back because it's good for another thing called chop and drop. It's good for chop and drop is a permaculture term where there's three things that are usually mentioned for chop and drop. There's comfrey, moringa, and Tithonia. It's the Mexican sunflower. So it means exactly what it sounds like. You chop it and you drop it, and then you let Mother Nature do its thing, and it just decays and adds organic matter. Did you know organic matter holds 10 times its weight in moisture in water? So and then it's good to you get the microbes going, the good microbes, and so that adds a lot to the soil. Think about the forest. What would the forest do? Well, things branches fall off, and leaves are always falling off, and it adds to it becomes the next soil cycle as it decays.
Yeah,
So
I think some Carb Rock said something. I think I just saw a comment. Said Carb Rock said, "I like to think of the soil as a plant's digestive tract." That's really interesting that Carb mentioned that because I don't have the graphic. I should have had it ready because I saw this really cool graphic, and I'll try to post it on my Be Green with Amy Facebook page, and it shows the digestive tract of a human, and then on next to it it shows the root of a plant, and when you look at it, the root of the plant has all these little hairs that are hair like things that are sticking out of the root all the way around, and that's how it kind of absorbs the nutrients from that microbiome of the soil. And then when you look at the human digestive tract, it looks like that plant root that's turned inside out, and all those little hair like things that you see out there, they're inside the digestive tract, and that's where the human digestive system absorbs the nutrients in through those little villi or what hair like things that they have. So yeah, I agree. It's
mhm.
kind of very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Nature is just so fascinating, and we need to get back to how nature does things. You know, I on my YouTube channel, I have Cynthia Schaefer, who has her own series on my channel, and we between her and I, we present two totally different methods of organic gardening. Now, I will talk about using the very common pest control and disease control things like neem oil and other things, but her thing is, what would the forest do? Like I just said, and so she has a very hands-off approach and just let nature do whatever it needs to do. And I'm kind of leaning towards that a little more as the years go by. And a good example of that is that eggplant tree that I just showed you. So a couple months ago, I saw aphids were taking over the leaves, and I was like, oh shoot, I'm gonna, you know, I don't want to have to use neem oil because it stresses out the plant, you definitely don't want to use it during the day. You want to use it if you are going to use it as the sun is going down, or at least in the shade. So uh, I saw a ladybug, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna hold off before I do anything. There is the method of spraying it with the water, spray the bugs off with the water. But I just decided to just give it a day or two and see what the next day there were two ladybugs. And then the next day there were still two ladybugs, cleaning it up, and there were fewer aphids. And then I started seeing ladybugs in different stages. There was a larvae, and uh, there were two ladybugs procreating, and nature was doing its thing, and my plant is aphid free, and any day I can go out there and find a ladybug, at least one. So I have something that is attracting ladybugs to my garden, and I want to keep them here.
Exactly, because I've heard of people who buy uh, ladybugs
Mhm.
and then they release them in their garden and then they all fly away.
I do that every now and then. I haven't done that for a while. We have the butterfly world where you can buy ladybugs. I always call ahead to make sure they have them in stock if I'm going to get them. But yeah, most of them will fly away, but I've released so many packages of those over the years. I think some have hung around the neighborhood, and I like to think that the ones that are cleaning up my garden right now are descendants from those that I've released.
Right. Yeah. I I remember we're trying to get a Dr. Ron Weiss. He is actually a medical doctor. He practices in New Jersey. He practices plant based medicine, but he also has a garden. He moved his practice to a huge multi-acre land in New Jersey, and he's making all these organic foods that he's growing. And he talks about how the plants that are grown organically and are not treated so much with this pesticides and herbicides, that they grow stronger because they're fighting off the pests and diseases, and that the nutrients in these plants, because the plants have had to produce these things inside of them, whether it's scents or whatever they do to defend themselves, it makes them even more nutrient dense for humans to consume than if conventional produce was grown with all the different chemicals on it. Those produce items don't have to defend themselves about from anything, so they don't
Right.
have those chemicals, as many phytochemicals inside of them. So
Yeah.
those eggplants are going to be good, good for you too.
Yeah, yeah, and also a lot of gardeners, I see on the South Florida Edible Gardening and Sustainable, garden page that we have. I'm admin on that, and also Cynthia Schaefer. She's the one that started that. We see people suggesting to other gardeners to use dish soap. No, I mean, if you have to, just go with a very bare minimum. I mean, because dish soap, it will strip the natural defenses of the plant. So there's a remedy. There's a video that I did recently about dealing with powder mildew. You can find that on my channel. It's one of the most recent ones. So powder mildew. Uh, so one of the things that I recommend is in a gallon to use only 3 drops of biodegradable dish soap, and no more than what you have to, because like I said, it destroys the plant. A healthy plant has a way to defend itself, and you're stripping it from that defense by using dish soap.
So, what do you think about worm tea? I know of some people that say that they like to spray the worm tea onto their plants.
Um, So I'm not
Kind
really
of as a
sure about worm tea, but I use a compost tea, and I actually, so yeah, I have a picture here of compost tea. This is so I have worm castings in this, as well as about 3 or 4 cups of compost and some kelp, and that's just a very basic recipe for my compost tea. Here we go. If you're going to do a compost tea, you need a 5-gallon bucket, air pump, because you've got to keep the microbes, those good microbes, aerated. You don't want it to go anaerobic. And then brew time between 24 to 48 hours. Your basic ingredients, like I was saying, about 3 or 4 cups. You don't want to do more than 4 cups of compost, then kelp, worm castings, and or bat guano.
oh, that's interesting.
So then you can use this as a drench for the soil. I'll do both. I'll like after 24 hours, I'll do the drench, and then after 48 hours, I'll do the foliar spray.
Uh huh. Right. So I call it worm tea. What you were
Okay,
talking about. So that's what Alice is just asking. What is worm tea? So it's basically a brew, right?
great.
Of worm castings and the other things that you were mentioning.
So when I first discovered the science of compost tea, I was so fascinated with it. I was telling friends and neighbors about it, whether they were interested in gardening or interested in hearing about it or not, because I was so excited about the science of how the microbes one bacterium of in the right condition will split off and have. I don't remember the numbers offhand anymore, but uh, so one microbe can become thousands within 12 hours or so. I wish I still knew those numbers, but the whole idea is it just grows exponentially, and that's what you're doing. You're brewing these good microbes for your plants, and we want a healthy soil, and healthy soil makes healthy plants. Healthy plants make healthy people.
Right. It just makes closes up that circle. So did you talk about biochar yet? I don't I remember in the beginning you were talking about amending the soil.
Yeah, so I have used biochar, and I I was gonna try making my own biochar, but um, so I I follow Elaine Ingham, Dr. Elaine Ingham, and she's a soil biologist, and who I highly regard. And she says that biochar is overrated. She's done tests on it, and her soil web organization that she has did some tests on it, and it wasn't any substantial difference. So she says it's high. There's a lot of hype around it, and I part of me still kind of wants to believe that it holds on to the nutrients, and it retains those nutrients. But her argument is, you've got the microbes doing that. You've got the microbes that are they have enzymes that extract the boron from, like, say, the azomite dust, rock dust that I mentioned. They're working on that. They're extracting that, and then they're going to process that. They're holding on to it, and they're processing it, and then they develop a symbiotic relationship with the roots, and the roots are providing sugars and proteins and carbs, basically cookies. They're giving it's mostly sugars. They're giving cookies to these microbes, and the microbes are giving, like, say, boron or magnesium, potassium to those roots, and they're delivering it to the. Another thing that Elaine Ingham says is the roots will actually send out a signal. The plants will send a signal down to the roots that, hey, I'm deficient in boron, or manganese, and so those microbes get that signal, and they're delivering it.
Oh,
She
it is
says
so
it.
amazing.
Yeah, she describes it as calling for delivery of pizza. Hey, I need some pizza. I need some protein, some carbs now.
And it's amazing. I referred to Dr. Ron Weiss, and he was telling. He was speaking at made a presentation. He was talking about how, like, you could have a row of broccoli plants growing, and a pest could go over to one of the broccoli plants and start trying to bother that plant. And in the soil, in the roots, that one broccoli plant, it's like a telephone pole. It sends a signal to the next one, which keeps sending signals all the way down the row to all those broccoli plants that there's this pest in the area.
Yeah.
And the broccoli plants actually change their chemical composition to try to make them taste differently to the pests to repel it. And that was like what I was talking about earlier, about how the organic vegetables and fruits are so much healthier for us, not just because they don't have the pesticides and the herbicides, but because they have more phytonutrients in it and phytochemicals in it, because they're trying to repel these pests. But like you were talking, they don't just communicate to the root system, they communicate to the plants that are in the vicinity, which is just, it's just so amazing.
Right. Nature is just baffling. It's so amazing. So what you just described, where the plants, there's something connecting, where there's an underground network, and Cynthia Schaefer talked about this, and I think it was her soil building episode. And I have an episode that I'm editing right now, and I'm hoping to have that on the channel too, where I'm going to dig a little deeper on this subject. But basically, mycorrhizal fungi, once it's developed underground, it can. So you could have plants on one side of the house that are being attacked, like you said, by aphids, and the plants over on the other side of the house are getting that signal, and they'll build up that protection against the aphids. And that's something Cynthia was saying. So that's if you have healthy soil around your home.
Yeah, that's just so spectacular.
Yeah,
So you talking about ladybugs? Do you ever get praying mantis?
I would love to do that. I would love. Yeah, I I I don't know how long they'll hang out. I'm kind of afraid that after I order some that they'll take off too, like the ladybugs do.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I had something that to me they're a little creepy though. They're kind of cute, but then
Yeah.
I'm like, you're okay out here. Just don't find your way in my house.
Yeah. Those good guys.
So, what do you suggest that people do about weeds? Is it just get in there every day and pull them before they get big? I mean,
I don't I don't have much of a weed problem in my garden because I do a lot of mulching, some heavy mulch. I've got another slide here. Uh, okay, here we go. So I will heavily mulch, and this is around my starfruit tree.
and what is
Uh,
it? What is in the mulch?
so I will order my. I don't buy store bought mulch. I'll get a whole big truckload of. So this is in my driveway, and this is
Oh,
about 3 to 4 feet tall of mulch in my
I could
driveway.
just
And
imagine what your neighbors. Well, I guess they know you by now, but maybe the first time you did this, they were like,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
And I do wear a mask when I'm mulching because of if you have allergies and you get a mulch pile like this. This, oh, by the way, all this is free. If you develop a relationship with a local arborist, they would when they you know chip these trees down from so another person needs a tree taken down, they take it down and they or even trimmed, they'll chip it up, and they don't want to have to take this to the dump and have to pay a fee. They would much rather give it to a gardener who could put it to good use, and I gladly take it. And but I don't use this much. I don't get this much mulch at one time anymore. Oops, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't use this much mulch at one time anymore because I found someone else that has a smaller truck and can deliver smaller deliveries at one time. So what I was saying about the why I wear a mask and the allergies. If you have allergies, you really need to wear a mask when you do this. It even with the mask, I might have a mild cough for a few weeks, and I just got over mine, and I I diffuse I diffuse essential oils. So here's my diffuser
Oh, that's really beautiful.
with tea tree oil and some other oils, but you want to be careful about diffusing some of those oils if you have pets. So
Right.
I don't do that around our
Yeah.
cats. We love our cats.
I would
So
say even if
those
you didn't have allergies, I think, just because of all the dust that probably comes about when you're handling the mulch, I would think that that could just get in your lungs anyway. So it'd probably be a good idea for anybody to wear some kind of a mask to keep them protected from the dust.
Right. It's actually a lot when because it heats up just like a compost pile, and when you dig into it, you got a puff, a big plume of methane gas, and that methane gas will carry spores of fungal spores that are not, it might be good for the environment, but it's not good to get into your lungs.
Yeah.
A lot of things that are organic, I've heard of, let's see, the diatomaceous earth, also known as DE, to get rid of aphids. And,
Yeah.
I use that occasionally, but I do not breathe that stuff. I've heard of someone dying because they got too much of it in their lungs.
Wow.
So, and that's, you want to wear a mask when you work with that sort of thing.
So that kind of mulch is okay to put around a tree trunk because I thought somebody had said, don't put mulch close to the trunk of your trees or your fruit trees or something. Is that just like the store-bought mulch?
No, I'm glad you brought that up because you can, I guess you can't really tell in this picture, but I do have the mulch pulled away from the trunk.
Okay.
You do not want to have the mulch, especially when it's fresh, pushed up. And when it's fresh, it's like I said, it heats up to, it could get as hot as 160 degrees, and that could damage the trunk. And then even after that, the mulch is holding on. Like I said, organic matter holds 10 times its weight in water. So all that moisture up against the trunk could rot the trunk. So
Wow.
I do have the mulch pulled away from it, but I can go 12 inches deep with that mulch as long as it's not up against a plant or tree trunk.
Okay, well, that's good
And
to know because a lot of people like to, even if they get the decorative mulch, they like to just put it all
yeah,
around their trees and make it pretty, and then they may have problems with the growth. And now that maybe that's something that somebody can learn from that. Let's start with some of our questions. We have
okay.
some questions from our audience. Okay, Ben C. What are good sources for seeds?
I'm so glad that question is there because one of my, I guess my very first go-to is Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. It is their website is rareseeds.com, rareseeds.com. And if they don't have whatever you want in stock, my second go-to is Johnny Seeds, and I believe that's just johnnyseeds.com. There's a number of good ones. High Mowing Seeds is another good company. You, I definitely go with non-GMO companies, um, companies that will actually test their seeds, and they do their best. That it's not 100%, but they do what they can to keep their seed genetics pure. So
Thank you for
I
that.
respect that, and those are the companies I want to support.
Right. And that's what we have to do. We vote with our purchases, and sometimes even lately a lot of people feel like they don't have any power to make change, but that's one way that you can help make change by supporting these businesses that have the heirloom seeds and the organic type of things. Okay, let's get another question. Joyce, what are some tips to grow a pineapple from an organic store-bought pineapple top? That's something in Southwest Florida. That's like one of the things people like to do.
Yeah, let me see if I still have a slide up
I
with.
actually, I admitted, I don't really have a green thumb, but I was actually successful in doing this. But I don't know if I really did it the right way. So maybe David can give the best
Okay.
tips
Well,
as far as
let
doing
me
that.
share. Oh, I'm sorry, I do not have a slide of my pineapples. I took that out.
Okay.
um, uh, well, you know what? I'll just tell you.
Okay.
All right. So with the pineapple tops, sure, I'll cut off like you would normally do, cut off the crown, and I like to leave some of the core. So I'll do like a tapered cut, leave some of that core on there, and then I'll strip off some of those bottom leaves because right where the leaves grow out of, those are where the roots are going to grow, and I will let that dry out for. I've got some that have been drying out for weeks. that I'm going to use um, in my garden beds just as placeholders because I have garden cats and I don't want to get my garden cats in my garden beds, and so I'll put tomato cages out there. It'll be a mess, but it's something to kind of help deter the cats and the raccoons from getting in there and digging it up. Here I go on a rabbit trail. Back to
That was really good advice because I know
yeah,
that like I have a pineapple growing and then I have some rosemary next to it and I go to snip off some of the rosemary and that scratchy pineapple leaf gets me, and I didn't really think about that for deterring some furry friends.
yeah, yeah. I like I said, I love our cats, and I have my one that's I call her my garden girl, and I to help deter her from getting up there, I built her own sandbox, and she loves her sandbox. So she's got hers, and I've got my boxes. But back to the pineapples. So I'll let that dry out, and at least for 2 or 3 days, and you can go for weeks, and then you can either I've seen people where they can root it in water, and I've never done that. So, but I don't know how many times in a week you need to change that water. Uh, I just stick it in the soil and let it grow the roots, and you know I've got a pineapple plant that I'm growing right now that I'm growing a lot more of that and less of the store bought ones. It's called white pineapple because the leaves I could like feel the leaves and not get bloody hands because the leaves are not sharp like the other ones. I see my camera is really out of focus.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I'd never heard of a white pineapple. That's really nice.
Yeah, but the great thing, like I said, the leaves are not gonna the very tip of the leaf can be sharp, but
Mm,
so
that's interesting. Okay, let's get another question. Robin, is now a good time to plant garlic? I'm a newbie. Suggestions?
well, not well. Yeah, I guess if you're in South Florida, you could. I've heard. I had a discussion recently with someone on our South Florida garden page about this, and she says that she's been growing garlic for 2 years with no problem. And I don't know what her secret is because I thought it was just too humid. I've tried growing it and it lasted for maybe 3 months or so just for the greens, and she grows it for the greens, and also even if it's temporary, I guess it's a good thing to do because it's another one of those things that wards off pests. It's a good companion plant, and that's the main reason why I grew it when I did. But so as far as when kind of depends on what part of the country you're in, and I would look that up uh, wherever you live.
Okay,
If
that's
you
a
are
good.
in South Florida, we're coming up on the cool summer month, or cool months, and yes, this would be the time to get ready to plant that. I wouldn't put it out yet. I would wait until maybe September, the end of September or November.
Okay. Let's see our question. Joe, it will be the first time gardening for me in Southwest Florida, so I'd like to keep it simple. What should I start out with?
I would suggest some edible landscape perennials. And in my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about these plants that I recommend. Joe, you should get these plants. I mean, get a moringa tree, get some longevity spinach, Okinawa spinach, sisu spinach, also known as Brazilian spinach, and all these plants that we call spinach down here, they're not related to spinach that you can buy in the store. Not related to it at all. It's just a name. There's also, um, oh boy, there's so many of these plants that we call spinach. Uh, The name's
Okay.
it's a pretty vine. Um,
I know for me, I I have a hibiscus tree.
yes.
I did really well with that, and that's another one that's so cool. I mean, I harvest the leaves because I like to cut them up and put them in my salad, and then I
Mhm.
just take what's left of that twig that I took the leaves off of, and I just stick it in the ground, and then it wants to
Right.
grow another tree. So I'm a fan of these cut and grow kind of things because
Me too.
I can just ignore them
Yeah.
and
Oh,
they do well.
and Joe, get some katuk. Katuk
Um,
is great to have. It's it's so nutritious and it has a nutty taste. I think it tastes like peanuts, and it's so easy to grow once you get it established. And I had no idea that it would get so tall. I have one that my main katuk plant has it was getting up to about 8 or 9 feet tall, and I had to trim it back. I had no idea it was going to get so big.
Yeah, and that's just another one of those plants that you could just chop it down
Hmm.
and it'll just keep growing like a weed, but you can eat it. I think that's pretty good because there are some people that live with associations and they're not allowed to have gardens,
Hmm.
but they could have these bushes and trees and they just look like ornamental plants and they can eat them. So I think that's
Exactly. Your
pretty cool.
HOA will not bother you with these plants.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, let's see if we have time for another question. Ella, how to prep soil for a raised bed? I think you want to just, she might have come in a little late, so
okay.
you can
Right.
just say
So,
it quickly.
okay. For prepping my bed, I use mostly compost, and I'll add worm castings and azomite rock dust. Azomite rock dust. It's Azamite, and it's full of minerals. And then I'll do a foliar spray and a drench of sea crop. It's a mineral substance that comes from the ocean. They extract most of the salt from that. You just want to follow the directions on that one.
Yeah,
That's
that's
basically it.
that sounds great. And then you know that all these minerals and wonderful things are going into your plants and they're going to benefit you too after they benefit the plants. Okay, let's have another question. Emily, iguanas, squirrels, and rabbits. Oh my. Suggestions?
Wow. Well, I feel your pain. I I'm so lucky that I haven't really had to deal with iguanas as much. I mean, I've when they show up in our house, they not in our house at our house. They're usually around the pool area, and uh, they've not knock on wood they've not found my garden yet. So and squirrels, well, I have had a squirrel problem this past year. A squirrel discovered my mango tree,
Um,
and thankfully I had enough to share. So, but one of my garden cats, my none of our garden cats really hang out on that side of the house. But I got Mo. I picked her up and took her over there and put some catnip over by that tree. Just maybe the squirrel won't want to be around where the cat is. And I just the other day I found her hanging out on that side of the house, and I'm so glad to see her over there. So cats are a good deterrent for iguanas. I've heard dogs are a great deterrent, and I've heard that the cats too. The iguanas are, I guess, are afraid of them. I'm not sure. No, as far as keeping them out of the garden, I've seen people build like a cage type of thing, pretty elaborate framing and then chicken wire. Oh, here's something that the local here, the Urban Farming Institute, what they do is, um, they have the garden. They have a it's a community garden, right? So a lot of the gardeners, to keep the iguanas out, they put up a fencing, but a very unstable fence, and iguanas don't like that, and they will not climb any further. So, and then they were showing me that someone else put up a chain link fence, which is stable, and it didn't help. The iguanas got in there.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's hope they don't evolve past that shaky fence.
Right.
Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about something that a project that you worked on. It was a movie, and I wanted you to, if you could just tell our listeners and our audience, our viewers about it a little bit.
Okay, sure. This is here's a slide of I recently won a Telly Award for editing this film called "Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle." And this man here, Jeffrey Smith, a couple years ago, I thought, what the heck? Let me send Jeffrey Smith my portfolio and just see if he has some work for me to do. Now this is a time when my job back then was they let us work from home and let us take on other work. Basically, we were cut to 1099 at
Mhm.
that time, and so this was some work that I got from him. I did some other edits before this, but I poured my heart into this film, and it's only 16 minutes long, and you can watch this documentary by going to protectnaturenow.com. And Dr. Elaine Ingham, that I mentioned earlier, the soil scientist, soil biologist, she's in this film, and this has a story about something that she was closely related with or tied to in 1991. And I'm not going to go into any details, but just to let you know, when when first of all, when I started working on this film, I had to pinch myself every day. I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing a film for Jeffrey Smith, and it has Elaine Ingham in it. I just had goosebumps, and just every day I was working on this film to begin with, I was just like, I'm so grateful to be able to do this. And I put everything and I was like, now Jeffrey, I don't have images. Are there pictures, or what do we have that I can use to tell this story? We talked about hiring an animator and animate something, and we decided against that. We didn't feel like that was the best way to tell the story. So I shot some things. I like rigged up what it would have looked like, and my what it looked like in my mind, and so I had to make pesto out of some plants I have, and make like slime on the surface of the soil when she talks about that. So that was me, and I'm mixing. You see my hand mixing up the sludge with the potting soil, and then you see my hand turning on when she talks about the farmers put this all the residues from after their crops, all the rest of it, into a barrel, and then they inoculate it with this organism, and they open up the spigot 2 weeks later, and there comes out alcohol to run their tractors. Well, that's my rain barrel, and my hand is opening up the spigot on the rain barrel.
Oh,
So
that was really clever.
I had to be creative and try to, and
Yeah.
so it turned out pretty good, and I highly recommend.
That picture, it reminds me of in the beginning of when your presentation, when you showed the before and after of your house,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it kind of reminds me of that, and I guess that's what this movie seems to be about, where,
yeah.
what we do to our earth and
It's
how it can affect us one way or the other. So
right.
it sounds like a really good movie to
Basically,
watch.
an organism almost got out in nature. They were 2 weeks away from releasing this, doing a field test. Once you release it, there's no putting it back.
Hmm.
And now is a really good time with this pandemic. We saw how this one organism, how quickly it spread around the globe, and now this what happened in 1991. If that organism did get out, it would have made this pandemic look like a picnic.
Right. Yep. There's a lot of things happening, and we need to be aware. And movies like this help make us aware because, one genie didn't get out of the bottle, but there's other genies out there that could. So we all need to be aware. And I think that by watching broadcasts like this and going on David Stack's YouTube channel, when we watch these kinds of videos, we're voting and we're showing the world that these are the things that are important to us. So I
And
really
that's
wanted to thank you, David, for coming on the show. And like I said, you do have your YouTube channel and Stacks Urban Harvest. That's all you'd have to type in on YouTube, and you could find all your great videos there. And I really want to thank you for coming on. And we'll put a link to the other show that you came on as well. It's really important for everybody to know about gardening, even if you just want to grow some herbs in your windowsill. Try something, and we all need to get back in touch with the earth and what it can do for us. And I'm Be Green with Amy, so I'm all about eating greens, and even herbs are greens. So if you can try to grow things like that, I think it will be really beneficial to you. I wanted to thank someone who's been in the background posting questions for us, and that's Rebecca from PKA Solves. And she's been engineering this, and she's been very helpful in doing all that. And I also, oh, hi, Rebecca, there she is. And I also wanted to thank Jess from Jess Task Voice. She did the countdown, and she also did the promos and the intro. And stay tuned because we're going to have a special announcement. But I really want to thank all of you guys for watching, because this is, like I was saying, this is what supports this lifestyle, whether you're eating a plant-based lifestyle or you're growing plants or you're doing both. These are the things that we need to share with others. So if you click like, if you share this broadcast with other people, if you go on David's website, as far as his YouTube channel, all these things really help promote this lifestyle of growing our own food or eating healthy food or doing both. And Just Has Voice, can you please tell us who's coming up next?
Nick Daverin and his wife Evelyn own and operate Local Spicery. At Local Spicery, they personally mill, blend, package, and sell the spices when they're at their peak of freshness. Learn about how spices can greatly enhance the taste of plant-based food. Join us Wednesday, September 1st, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, on Be Green with Amy, live.
Well, thanks again, everyone. And if you could please join me and David as I say my tagline. You can just type it in the comments so that you can do it with us. And that's be strong, be well, and be green. Are you ready, David?
I'm ready.
Until we see you again, remember, be strong, be well, and be green.
Green.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.